Hello, welcome to Galaxy Burn, the first and only Warhammer 40k podcast. So I've got someone with me today, a guest, who I've been wanting to talk to about their books for absolutely ages, because honestly, one of my favorite Black Library writers, who has just been absolutely killing it, like again and again and again, just like everyone a home run for absolute years now. And it's not just me saying it, it's also the fans. So we're here with Mike Brooks.
Hi.
Hello. We're making the sign.
Look, everyone needs some geometry on a podcast.
Yeah, exactly. I believe it's isosceles triangle.
Probably school was too long ago.
Yeah, that was a while back. It's definitely not right angle. Right angle would look very odd. Hi, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
No, thanks for inviting me.
No, I think you're the first Black Library author we've had on the show, so it's kind of like where I wanted to start. We'll get Dan out it one day. He's going to pick up his emails, but the guy's not on Twitter. I can't get to him. So let's just start with a little basic introduction to you as a person. So apart from having geometric hair and a very long black trench coat, like where are you from?
Yeah, that's on the door behind me. I haven't worn that in years. I haven't got around to do anything else with it yet.
Yeah, I've got one of those too. It's like a rain poncho that's just been in the corner of my room, giving me sleep paralysis for the last year. So let's just start with some basic biographical stuff, like where are you from? How did you get into writing? What is your background?
I'm from Ipswich in Suffolk. I live in Nottingham. I have done ever since I came here for university. As for getting into writing, I guess I've written stories for years and years and years. It was just not until about 2010 that I worked out how to finish stories. You start many novels, never go anywhere with them. I managed to work out how to finish a novel.
Mm-hmm. And what was the secret to finishing a novel?
Just so I could stop it one day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, what worked for me was I had these 3 different projects that I've been bouncing between, and sort of doing a chapter here and a paragraph there and stuff, and kind of going, oh, I'm doing too many things at once and I can't concentrate on one thing, and that's the problem. And eventually I said to myself, well, actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick one of these, and I'm either going to finish it or I'm going to acknowledge to myself that actually I can't finish a novel and I'm just making excuses. So I picked one of them and I did finish it, and it was very long and probably very bad, but I did finish it. And after that, it was like, oh, right, that's how you do it. And then I just kept writing novels.
Good. And how many did you get through before you actually got one like published? Just trying to give some hope out here to the
I'm just trying to think. This was a while back now. It was my 4th novel that was actually published that I'd written. The first one was just, I don't think anybody was ever going to publish that. The second one I wrote, I sent out to agents, and eventually through a confluence of circumstances managed to actually get an agent. And he sent that to editors, and I wrote a sequel in the meantime. Then it got quite far with one editor, but eventually was knocked back on the basis that they already had too much urban fantasy, which is what it was. And so I wrote, we had a discussion with the editors, like, well, what are you looking for at the moment? Because I've got a whole bunch of ideas. I just didn't know what to concentrate on. And he came back with something else and some other suggestions of what they were looking for. And I had an idea that I thought might fit with that. So then I wrote my 4th novel, and that got picked up and that got published. And I have practical aids here. That was Dark Run. That's the US cover. And that's the. Sorry, I'm trying to work this around because it's mirrored, so I'm moving things the wrong way. That's the UK cover. That's the wrong hand. There you go.
Yeah. I'm here too. I can't. I'm trying to do my hair, but it's not working because of the mirroring.
Inside of your head. Yeah. So so that was the fourth novel that I wrote. It was the first one that got published. Then there were 2 more sequels to that, and then in 2021 actually. It wasn't until 2021 that my next of my own series came out, which is Epic Fantasy, which is the Gold King Chronicles, starting with the Black Coast. That's the UK cover.
Oh yeah,
and the US cover. So I've got 2 trilogies of my own now, which is a space opera, and epic fantasy.
Awesome. And so 2021, that must have been around. When did you start writing for Black Library?
2017, I think.
Yeah, because I think you must have about 8, 9 different books out for them now, if I'm counting that right.
I think it's like 8 novels, a couple of novellas, and various short stories.
Let's count them all here. So you've got Lelith Hesperax, which we're going to talk about quite extensively today. 3 orc novels.
If I go in chronological order, I can remember them easier. Rites of Passage was first. Then it was Road to Redemption, Necromunda. 3rd was Brutal Cunning. 4th was Alfarius. Let's see. 5th, I think, was Huron Blackheart. 6th was Harrowmaster. 7th was the Big Dacker, and 8th was Lelith Hesperax. I think that's all of them.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure. So of those, I've read of the Lelith Hesperax, Big Dacker, Harrowmaster, and the Lion. So that's half of your output for Black Library. I've read, and I'm gonna circle back and do the other Uvtak Black Hawk one because I really liked that. I read Big Dacker like 2 days ago. Listened to rather, because I knew I needed to audiobook that one because the voices are going to be good. And the guy who did the audiobook did they give audiobook Oscars? Because dude deserves one. Like making like orcs and Gretchens not sound silly. I mean, sound a little silly, but not too silly that it bounces off you. That's a skill. So yeah, I really love that one. I have a little thing about orcs in 40k where I kind of sometimes the humor is a little too goofy, and it's not like I'm some guy who needs everything to be ultra grimdark in order to enjoy it. But sometimes it's just a little okay, got it to the humor. But with Big Dacker, I was getting we're going to sound like a wine guy now. I was getting tones of things like Terry Pratchett, obviously. I think a lot of people have compared that one to Terry Pratchett. But also P.G. Wodehouse, of all people, which is like the last person you're going to think about in relation to anything Black Library related. Like, you do not pick up one of those books and think you're going to be reminded of like English gentry having minor problems at the turn of the century. But yeah, some of the tone in it was very Wodehouse for some reason. Is he someone you've like read, or is he like an influence?
No, I don't think I've ever read any Wodehouse. I'm broadly aware of his existence, but that's about it. No, it was. I think Pratchett is definitely a comparison. I kind of I'm a big Pratchett fan, and I kind of sort of put myself kind of into that kind of headspace when I'm writing orcs deliberately. It's a sort of thing, like particularly the Discworld works with just these ideas of little bits of logic that sound logical for like a half a second, and then you realise that actually it's nonsense. But the world persists as though that is actually the case, and that's how I work with orcs. That's how orc logic works in my head. If they think of something and the immediate thing, not thinking it through, just go, oh yeah, that makes sense, and then they just proceed as though that's true. And that's how they work stuff out. That's what drives them. So yeah, I definitely kind of put myself into a sort of Pratchett headspace when I'm writing orcs for the weird logic and the strange conclusions.
Yeah, it works. I mean, Pratchett, I think, is like a unacknowledged successor to P.G. Wodehouse. I think he just created that tone, the sentences where just like logic stops working but does work in spite of that. I think that works for a bunch of orcs assaulting a city full of perverts, and it works for people on a world that's on the back of a turtle, and it works for people having minor problems at the turn of the century for some reason. So yeah, they want to go back and check out Jeeves and Wooster and see that actually you are bizarrely similar to this person you've never read. So how did you come to start writing for the Black Library?
I cheated. I applied for their what I say applied for. I submitted to Open Subs in 2015, I want to say, and I got through the first round, but I wasn't successful. If you live in Nottingham and you're in the alternative community, then you know people who work for Games Workshop, because that's a lot of who works there. So I was playing games at Warhammer World with a friend of mine, and the one who works there, and one of his friends who works there, and then we were playing an Inquisimundo campaign, actually, sort of crowd-made 28mm kind of old Necromunda rule set, but with the entire, you could play orcs or Space Marines or whatever. For a bit of a laugh, and I was playing orcs because, of course, and I was making up little bits of flash fiction and putting them in the Facebook group of the campaign, which is just, this is what my orcs are doing in between the battles, like the silly things of like, oh, we found another orc who's joined the mob, and of that, Black Orc was my leader, of course, because he's been my orc character for ages. And Starblitzer, War Boss, whatever. And I was talking to the bloke who was running the campaign, and I made a joke, really, saying, oh, Black Library wouldn't want some randomer writing stories about orcs going around the galaxy and blowing stuff up, would they? And he said, well, you're not a randomer, you're a published science fiction author, I'll ask. So he did, and the answer was apparently yes, eventually, after I'd written a couple of other things. So it was a case of, I talked to someone who worked there, and it turned out that if you were a previously published author, then actually, they would talk to you without you needing to go through Open Subs, which is very nice.
Yeah, that's like, so I do another podcast that's just about books in general, those ones. But and it's so common to find people just at the right place at the right time. And that's not like a criticism. It's not like you're a Nepo baby or something. It's just how it tends to work in any writing. Like I've known people who just like were just hanging out at the right pub, and now they've got a Netflix show.
There is obviously there's hard work involved, and you have to actually be vaguely good at what you're doing, but there is so much luck. I think the story that I tell that's I think most indicative of this is quite a few years ago now. I was at an event at Goldsborough Books in London, and I was talking to a couple of editors who knew who I was because I was friends with one of their authors, and one of them was showing me, they're both female, which is relevant in a moment. They were showing me, also a little bit tipsy, which may also be relevant. They were showing me this pamphlet they had of, this is who we're publishing next year. And so they were showing me this, and they got all the covers of books in there. And I'm looking through it with them, and then one of them suddenly goes, like she's never realized this before, goes, we don't seem to be publishing any women. And you got like 8-10 books in there, all male authors. And she turns around to my friend who's standing next to me and says, do you write at all? And it's just like, and my friend goes, well, no, I write and draw children's comics. And it's just, this is a commissioning editor from a relatively high profile science fiction and fantasy publishing house, just turning around and asking someone whether they write on the basis that they're standing next to someone they know is an author. It's just that, I mean, and if my friend had said, yes, I've just written an epic fantasy novel, this person would probably have said, here's my email, send it over and I'll take a look. I mean, and that's not an offer of a contract, but it is a hell of a lot of the more opportunity than most people will ever get, simply because my friend was standing next to someone. And yeah, this is what I was saying about I've been very lucky with my writing career, because I've happened to be in the right place at the right time, spoken to the right person at the right time. Anyone who tells you that they've got to where they are and there hasn't been a lot of luck involved is a liar. It shouldn't be how it works, but it is how it works.
And a long time ago, I used to read slush for a very, very big literary agency. Like, they publish like Thomas Pynchon and people, and the slush pile. You think you just send your manuscript along to an agency, and if it's good, it'll rise to the top. And that's it's literally very tiny percentage of books get written that way. Again, shouldn't be. It should be totally meritocratic, but often it isn't.
Well, yeah, I mean, I got my first agent in the same way. I sent out to various agencies. I've not got any luck. I got my first agent because I did a favor essentially to somebody. There was a website where people went to sort of get feedback, and also it was a convoluted process where if enough people voted for you could end up on the slush pile at HarperCollins, or you could end up on the desk at HarperCollins. But I was giving feedback to this author that I found and whose work I liked, and then he got picked up by an agent, and then he got a book deal, and he was like, "Oh, thanks very much for all the feedback you've given me. I think it was really helpful. Do you want me to put in a good word for you with my agent?" I was like, "Yes, please. That'd be great." So again, and he did, and then the agent looked at what I was writing and liked it, which obviously he still had to do, but you can jump to the head of the pile because someone else puts in a good word for you. And I did a favor to the guy, he did a favor back. It worked out for me. But yeah, no, it's very much a case of it's not a meritocracy, sadly, although I've lucked out in that instance.
Well, I mean, luckily you do have merit. Like, I don't think I've read. Yeah, everything I've read from you, I've really enjoyed. So let's talk about Lelith Hesperax. So simple pitch for a book: knife lesbians, and it's a very, very good book, and short, sweet, stabby. So there are a lot of characters in 40k, I think it's fair to say. And you could, of course, as you did with Black Hawk, just invent your own one. So what drew you to Lelith specifically?
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, Black Library came to me and said, "Would you like to write a novel about Lelith Hesperax?"
I'll do it.
Yeah. And but the reason I said yes, I suppose, is because I'd just written Drukhari for the Big Backer, and as antagonists. And although they are unpleasant to write in some ways, because you have to get your head into that sort of very, very nasty mindset, which I have to say does take its toll after a while. After writing Big Backer and then Lelith Hesperax, it was like, I want to write something a bit nicer now. I do not want to write any more torture elves. But it did make me very interested in thinking about how the society works and stuff, and the opportunity to explore that through Lelith, because Black Library were quite clear as like, we want this to be about her coming away from the Inari and back into Galora. And so the opportunity to explore that through Lelith was just sounded like a lot of fun. It's a recognizable character, so people are going to be invested from the start. It gives me a chance to look at a bit more at Drukhari society. I just felt like it would be fun.
It was. Well, I hope it was for you, but it was for me.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of threads I want to pick up on from what you just said there. So one is, of the 4 books that I've read, a lot of them have a theme of like returning, like coming back, getting back into your groove. Like Lelith Hesperax, obviously, she returns to Camorra. She becomes a gladiatrix again. The Lion returns after 10,000 years. Harrowmaster, even though he's not returning, he's like getting the Alpha Legion back into their groove, making them feel important again. is that like a conscious thing you're doing, or am I just like picked up on something weird there?
No, it's certainly not anything conscious that I'm doing. I think one of the things you have to bear in mind is that all these books are sort of a coordinated efforts between Black Library and myself. So for each one of those that you've mentioned, I was approached to do. I mean, I came up with Solomon Akura and Harrowmaster, but the broad idea was, what if there was a novel about an Alpha Legion commander who was trying to put the Alpha Legion back together rather than having them continually splintering. And obviously the Lion was returning because he'd been away for 10,000 years. You can't get around that. And again, Lelith was thinking, well, what if she comes back to the Dark City? So those things were things that I picked up on, but they were themes that I guess initially came from the initial discussion between me and the editors about what this book was going to look like, what vision they had for it, and why they were thinking of commissioning it.
Cool. So, I mean, another thing, the Camorra, it's always been difficult to write and difficult to kind of imagine as like a fan, because it's so unlike it. It's supposed to be a giant city in the webway, but it's not. Doesn't really function like a city. It doesn't look like a city. It looks like a bunch of spikes going everywhere. And yeah, it's a place that its economy runs on pain. It's like, how do you approach writing something that's so odd and is so unlike anything human?
I guess first of all, you can't approach it as something that's going to make complete sense. I mean, let's be honest. This is a lot of these settings have been made up in terms of what sounds cool, and it does sound very cool. But you can't. It's not been designed from the start with world building that's at a granular level of going down and going, how exactly does this work? How does the plumbing work? How does all? It's not been designed by that. It's a setting. It's essentially a setting for a faction in a tabletop game. That's what it's there for. To begin with. But then the fun things is going into those places that have been invented as background and going and having a little bit more look at some of the detail and going, how does this actually work? So yeah, there's a lot of stuff you have to. It's not like I sat down and went, this is how everything works. This is how it all fits together. But you go, okay. I was more interested in how does it work as a society, because it's been going for at least 10,000 years, but apparently all Drukhari are backstabbing and traitorous, and I was like, well, that can't work. You have to have some level of not exactly trust, but at least trust in someone else's interest aligning with your own for now. There have to be maybe not friends, but at least preferred enemies, because otherwise the entire society would fall apart, and it blatantly hasn't fallen apart. Therefore, there must be something that holds it together. It's a logical procedure. So that was a very interesting thing to look at in terms of trying to find out how this works. What are the alliances? How do the alliances work? Who is working on the basis of, well, I need to please this person because otherwise I will suffer, or if I do, then there's a benefit in it for me, and that's how it fits together. It's all done on self-interest, but sometimes or a lot of the time, the self-interest involves making sure that other people are happy because that benefits you. So I had to sort of try and think about it like that, which was a fun society to look at in that sense.
Yeah, at the top, there's always Adjudable Vect, like overseeing everything. So let's just go back to Lelith herself. So where is she emotionally and just in the plot when the story starts?
Frustrated and bored, I think. She was sort of taken off on this. She went on this expedition, crusade, whatever you want to call it, with the idea that she's essentially going to maybe get the chance to kill Slaanesh. I think that's basically what's in her head, which sounds like a good famous thing for her to do. And she's going to fight a lot of interesting things along the way and prove that she's the best fighter in the galaxy. And at the start of the novel, that hasn't really happened. And she's just bored by it because, well, I'm killing stuff here, but I could be killing stuff anywhere. And is frustrated that they're not really making any progress because this is not advancing her personal goals of, look at me, I'm the best fighter in the galaxy. So yeah, that's where she is at the start of the novel, and which I think is what makes it more makes her more susceptible to the lure of coming back to Kamora to find out what's going off there.
So one of the vibes I'm getting for this story, and as you notice from the PG Woodhouse Orc thing, my vibe sensors are wildly miscalibrated. So some of the
Sorry,
vibes I'm getting for this story are stuff like anime. It's like toxic.
Sorry, like what?
Anime. Of all
anime,
things.
right?
Yeah. And also professional wrestling. I'm not even a big wrestling guy. Wrestling that would be a commitment on par with getting into 40k again. Wrestling has a lore that is so much more complex than anything Games Workshop will ever do. And half of it's real and terrible. Did you see that Mr. McMahon documentary? It's monstrous what wrestling is behind the scenes. But essentially, if Rain functions like a pro wrestler, she has her own little wrestling, killing, murder promotion, and she brings in people from other things, like a WCW guy fighting a WWE guy, and yeah, she has to make.
Are we talking about Ivrain or Lelith?
Did I say Ivrain? Lilith. Yeah, sorry.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yes. What am I talking? Yeah, Lilith. Yes. Lilith has to bring in people and make these things entertaining, as well as entertaining herself and achieving her actual objectives. Was pro wrestling a thing in here? Because it was a thing that I really got from the book, and even the behind the scenes stuff seemed very much like what I'd see on WWE. Is that my vibe sense of being miscalibrated again?
No, I mean, I guess it wasn't something I was consciously thinking about in that sense, but I have watched wrestling on and off for most of my life, I suppose. It's something that I enjoy when it's done well. I guess also I'm a sort of fairly I was going to say I'm a fairly big UFC fan. I'm not necessarily a fan of UFC because UFC is some similar strange business practices, but I enjoy watching mixed martial arts, and UFC is the most readily available one of those. So yeah, I mean, I watch and have watched various physical combat and simulated physical combat stuff, and there is definitely the massive showmanship element of professional wrestling. I mean, it's not to say it's not there a bit in UFC, but much more so in professional wrestling, which fits in with the kind of the gladiator stuff of the Chukari. But yeah, I think it's also just sort of thinking back about the games, even stuff like games at the Colosseum. Where you've got, here's a bunch of people, they're fighting lions today. You don't get that nowadays, thankfully. What weird and strange beasts can we come up with to fight, for these people to fight, for everybody to watch and cheer about? To be honest, I think it's much more a sort of ancient Roman Colosseum game spectacle influence than something directly like WWE or even UFC.
Yeah, I mean, there is something that is more WWE than Colosseum games. And that's the idea of kayfabe, which kind of comes up in the book. I don't know if that's, again, an intentional thing, but there's a lot of, when we're talking about the Harlequin character and Asdrubal Vecht, there's a lot of playing with truth. And I'm not going to spoil the end of the book, but there's a point at the end where Lilith has to kind of acknowledge did I do this for myself, or did Asdrubal Vecht like puppet me into doing what I've just done? And that's kind of the playing with truth and fiction in the way that like WWE does, where something that will happen in a wrestler's real life will suddenly become a storyline in this fictional universe they've created. That kind of I kind of felt that coming through in the book as well. And yeah, I think Kimura is a great place for that, because like you said earlier, people have to trust each other, but they're mistrustful by nature. Anything you say could end up being a fiction. Any person you meet could end up being a harlequin in disguise or one of Vecht's agents. So I thought that was more wrestling, more like what we find contemporary WWE than what we'd find in like a Roman Colosseum.
I think I was thinking of that part more as just sort of a political maneuvering, basically. Not exactly Game of Thrones stuff, but similar to that, power balances. Who has what alliances? What can they make people do through intimidation or through bribery or through shared self-interest? So I think that was definitely much more of the sort of political maneuvering that takes place in a lot of stories, to be honest.
And Lelith herself, I mean, I don't think anyone who picks up a 40k novel is expecting the people inside it to be paragons of virtue. That's kind of why we read this stuff. But I mean, Lelith is like she's like especially malignant in a lot of ways. She has a lot of like the markers in like a Dungeons and Dragons story. She would be an evil dark elf, and there wouldn't be any redeeming quality to her. So, and at one point, I don't want to spoil things for people. She straight up like goes on a slave raid. She just like picks a planet as like, I'm going to go there with all my friends. We're going to kill a bunch of people and take a bunch of slaves. Not like the nicest thing to do as a person. So, but yeah, she's still incredibly compelling. And so how do you walk the line there?
I think you have to, and one of the interesting challenges of writing Xenos of any sort is you have to acknowledge that their morality is going to be different to human morality. Well, some human morality anyway. Some people, as we know, are quite fine with slaving. But anyway, it's certainly different to my morality. But I think you can't, or you should not, apply human morality to Lelith in terms of, in that sense, she is a product of her environment. And in a couple of the stories I've done, it sort of, I muse on that vaguely in terms of this environment. What would happen if they were in a different environment, perhaps? But she is a product of her environment, and she is probably one of the apex products of her environment. This is who she has to be to survive in Kimura. And these are not immoral actions as far as she is concerned. This is just how the galaxy is. And so, and in the same way as I will try and get into the headspace of orcs and go, okay, well, this is their logic. It's not human logic, and it's not logic as we understand it, but it's their logic, and this is what works for them. You go, okay, well, this is Drukhari morality. It's not our morality, thank God. But it's natural for them. It is essentially, and so I have to write it as just like this is the baseline. This is what is normal for her. And so if I write it as that, then hopefully that comes through a bit. Obviously, we don't like what she does, or we probably shouldn't like what she does. But if we acknowledge that this is normal for her and her society, then you can look at some of the other things and go, okay, well, maybe she's still a compelling character despite this. But yeah, I think it's the morality thing of I very much take it as there's just things, rather than there being a universal morality of stuff that is objectively right and objectively wrong. There's stuff I like and stuff I don't like, and I don't like the stuff that Lelith does, but it's just what's normal for her. That was my cat falling off the table.
Don't worry, it wouldn't be a podcast without a cat doing something.
Yeah,
it's like the one universal law of podcasting. So like the other like key character in the book, apart from Lelith and to a certain extent Adstrabal Vect, though he doesn't appear much, he's always like there, is Morgana. And she's a new character, I believe. She's created by you. Am I right? Yeah. So who is she and how is she different from Lelith?
And who is she? She's another Grand Succubus of a rival cult. How is she different from Lelith? I guess she has an inferiority complex.
Pre-major one.
Yeah. Lelith is convinced with some justification that she is the best. Morgana is obsessed with the fact that she knows she's probably not the best, and she really wants to change this. So, and that's her driving force. Is she feels constantly overshadowed by Lelith, and is absolutely determined that she's going to do whatever it takes to make sure that doesn't happen anymore.
Cool. And I know Vect is a pretty. He doesn't have a lot of lines. He's a pretty significant character, but like, where is he at the book's start, and what's he trying to get by pulling Lelith and Morgana's puppet strings? If he even is doing that, we don't know. He's so mysterious.
That is a very good question, and had you asked me that question shortly after I finished writing the novel, I may have been able to answer it. However, I've written about 3 since then, and the honest answer is I can't remember.
That's okay, no problem. And yeah, with that, you get a pass on that because he could just be playing such crazy games that he'll never be able to work out his Machiavellian scheme.
Yeah. Who knows? So, it's all a mystery.
And just lastly, Lelith is kind of the only 40k character I can think of who qualifies as being like a celebrity in her own world.
I mean, Gilman. He's kind of a celebrity
in a way like Barack Obama is a celebrity. He does things that make everyone like him. I don't think anyone's
everybody knows about him, but yeah, I suppose Lelith is, I guess, the equivalent of the TV star, I guess.
Yeah. Like there's a really good section where she goes out with her entourage to a club, like stuff that you'd see like Britney Spears doing it when she was in a bad way. She feels a lot more like a celebrity than anything we've seen in 40k. Like, I don't think the Imperium has the equivalent of celebrities. It has people like Gilliman, and it has like saints that you're supposed to revere, but it doesn't have like Kesha. I don't know why I pulled Kesha there, but So,
I'm thinking about. I'm absolutely down for a short story where Saint Celestine goes to a club. But yeah, no, it is a very different vibe. I guess it's because the Drukhari are the only society we've seen which has that sort of mass public entertainment, I guess. The Craft World are, some Harlequins might come and do some dances every now and again, and you might have, I don't know, a pottery competition or something. But it's not, and the Imperium are too busy drudging away in factories, by and large, to have anything like that. You could write a novel that's set in the Imperium where there is a very famous actor or something in, like, on a specific planet that's like a very wealthy planet where there's a lot of people with free time or something, and that would be believable. But yeah, Lelith is the only sort of pre-existing character with that sort of superstardom.
Yeah, I like that because it's something we haven't seen in 40k before. It feels like, even though Kamara is a very, very different place from the real world, that makes it feels very lived in. That's she can be walking down the street and people are like, oh my god, that's Lelith Hesperax. Go get an autograph. Oh no, she'll stab you. And that was probably the feature that made Kamara make the most sense to me. Like, it's always
Actually,
felt
that bit does sound a little bit like pro wrestling because, I mean, I'm not sure how much these days, but particularly like sort of a few decades ago, like 80s and stuff, in Japanese wrestling, like the Japanese wrestlers were, it was all kayfabe still, obviously, but people would sort of swarm wrestlers and like the wrestlers would just go, get out of the way and whack them in the face. And that was seen as, oh my God, I got punched by, Giant Baba or something. It wasn't an autograph, but it was like, yeah, I got hit by a wrestler. So yeah, that kind of thing. Like, I got stabbed by Lelith Hesperax, but she didn't kill me. Hooray.
Yeah, I mean, for Drukhari, like, dying isn't that big of a deal if they don't die permanently. If they die permanently, very big deal.
Oh,
but
very big deal.
Being killed by Lelith Hesperax would be like a story that you'd be telling your friends. You'd be like, oh, 1,000 years ago, she stabbed me in the face. It's brilliant. You'd be telling that story forever. Yeah, I love the idea of kayfabe and like these wrestlers having to pretend to be their characters. Like, even if you see them in like a restaurant, like the Undertaker always has to be the Undertaker. He has to be silent and just glower at you in a restaurant. That's so extra and so unnecessary. But it's very good.
I mean, I think that's been pretty much abandoned now. But
yeah.
So there was a big thing. There was a big issue in the 80s, I think, where a face and a heel were pulled over by the police, I think, because one of them was drunk driving or something like that. And it was this big deal that a face and a heel were riding together in a car, and I was like, oh no, what is this? And that was the start of breaking kayfabe. Anyway, we're getting distracted by wrestling.
That happens. There's another podcast in staple. So I think just to round things out, what are you working on outside of Black Library at the moment? Like, what are you writing? What's your newest books of your own that you've been working on and have just come out and stuff?
Well, I finished a fantasy adventure novel, which it's not full Pratchett, but it's kind of, I was trying to sort of channel the mindset that I get into when I'm writing orcs for it. It's quite like, it's not a comedy, but it's a bit more lighthearted than the epic fantasy trilogy I did, which had some quite serious political stuff in it. I've sent that out to various editors that I have contact with to see if anybody's interested in that. So I'm waiting on response to that. I'm working on something else at the moment, but as to exactly what that is, I'm not entirely sure yet. There's a bunch of different ideas, but I've only I've planned some of it and I've started, but I've only written about 10,000 words or so. I'm still trying to work out exactly what sort of vague subgenre of fantasy it's going down, and see where that goes.
Cool. So we'll look out for those. And the two trilogies you've worked on, the space opera and epic fantasy, just remind people what they're called and where we can get them.
So the space opera is the Kaiko series. That's made up of Dark Run, Dark Sky, and Dark Deeds, and you can get that off Amazon, obviously. You might find it in Waterstones, Barnes and Noble. They've been out for a few years now, so they're less likely to be on the shelves because the first one came out in 2015. But yeah, you can still find them. I mean, they were published by Del Rey UK and the UK and Saga Press in America. So you'll be able to find them on the internet. And they're in audiobook and ebook. The epic fantasy trilogy is the God King Chronicles. That's the Black Coast, the Splinter King, and the Godbreaker. Again, I've walked into Waterstones the other day and found one of them on the shelf. Barnes & Noble in America, independent bookshops, Amazon. They're on ebook and audiobook. and The Black Coast was shortlisted for Best Fantasy Novel at the British Fantasy Awards in 2022.
Awesome. Well done. So thanks again for coming. And
Thank you for
I will be
inviting me.
looking out for, I know we can't be talking about any new Black Library stuff you're working on, and that's fine. We understand. Games Workshop had their own little Asdrubal Vect. They have their machinations, wheels within wheels. So, but I will be looking out for it, and we'll be talking about it on the show as and when stuff comes out. So thanks again, Mike, and we'll be seeing you around.
Thank you very much.